My recent reads. The last time I did this video was about 3 months ago, so let's talk about the books I've read since then. The very first one I will be talking about is Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. Now, everyone knows this book. I mean, this book definitely made its rounds throughout booktok, booktube, and I think it was also like on the Goodreads Choice Award. Yeah, it won in 2022 for readers' favorite fiction. So I was very interested to read this book because I love literary fiction. I really do. I just love reading a book that's set in the modern world and we're focused on normal characters who don't have powers, and we're not in a fantasy world and there's not this crazy like big bad evil. You know what I mean? It's just people living their lives and we are kind of thrown into their circumstances and we just kind of have to see them live. I love those kind of books. So super quickly, this book is contemporary literary fiction. It's about two friends who are game developers, game designers. And I think they meet when they're like children. Sorry, it's been a minute. They meet when they're like little kids, and then they lose touch and then kind of reconnect when they're in college. And so there's a lot of tension, not a lot, it's not even a lot. It's like a little bit of romantic tension, but it's really just best friends who are coming together who end up creating a gaming company, and they throughout the course of the book are developing and creating games together. So the idea of like the games, that didn't really draw me in, but it was kind of interesting to kind of learn about what happened, what went on when you are developing a game, but like focusing on the actual plot or the actual connection between the characters. I felt it was so like stifled, like it just felt so blah. I don't know. I wasn't intrigued. I wasn't grabbed in. A good book to me is when I put it down and an hour later when I'm making dinner or when I'm watching TV or doing something else, I'm actively thinking about that book. That never happened throughout the course of reading it. Actually, what did happen was I got like halfway and I honestly wanted to DNF it, but I decided not to because it wasn't incredibly big. You know, the book, I was already halfway. So I was like, let me finish it. And so I ended up getting the audiobook on Spotify and finishing it up on there. Like that's how I know when a book is not good, when I can't even like finish reading it physically because I'm just not enjoying it that much to where I have to go to the audiobook. So I didn't like that book at all. I did rate it 3 stars because it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't good in my opinion. So that's kind of all I have to say about that. The next book I read this book called The Blighted Stars by Megan Key O'Keefe. Now, in my opinion, this book is kind of an underground book. Like, the only reason I even knew it existed was because of a TikTok that I came across. And it was just a TikTok regarding like, oh, you know, this random person just stumbled upon this amazing sci-fi book series. And they said it was amazing. It was great. And I was like, oh, okay, let me check it out. So I did, and I read the very first book. It's a book series, and I gave it 3 stars. It had so much going for it. Like the tension between the two main characters was good. You could tell it was going to become enemies to lovers. You could tell, and it's a book about we have like 2 main characters. We're in a fantastical like sci-fi world. One of our main characters is like the heir to a dynasty, and he is kind of equipped with the skills of like a geologist or like he studies rocks and stuff. And so he was the main character, and we had another character who was a kind of bodyguard type character without going too far into the plot. And so they both somehow ended up on a planet, and the bodyguard character, she kind of hates the main guy. And you can just tell that she's gonna get to know him and realize how good of a person he is, because his family and the dynasty that he is the heir to is kind of horrible, and like they do terrible things to people. And his dad, who is like the leader or whatever, he's like a horrible person. And so there's like a big kind of conspiracy in this book. And it wasn't bad. It just didn't do it for me. And it had 491 pages. And I truly believe that if they would have cut like 100 of those pages, I probably would have liked it more. Which is so interesting, because I wonder, like, when they do beta readers or when editors like start editing books, is that ever a thing that occurs where like a beta reader or an editor is like, yeah, cut 100 pages, like half of this is useless. Like, I wonder how often that happens, because I feel like it doesn't happen enough. Next book is None of This Is True by Lisa Joel. So this is a thriller book that was actually pretty unexpected, just because there are like a select few of genres of books that you will just never catch me reading, or not frequently. Like, I might read 2 a year, and I would put thrillers in that category. They're just not books I seek out, because I find that like what they hold in the book isn't what I'm looking for in a book. If that makes sense. Like, every thriller I've ever read, I've never felt really connected to any characters, and it's always been about like, who killed this person, or who's following me, or who this and who that. And those kind of questions I don't really care about if you don't build the characters up, and if you don't get any other part of their life other than who did it. So just like a blanket statement, thrillers are just not my vibe. And I never really have high hopes when it comes to thrillers, but I did give this 3 stars, but it actually wasn't that bad. So same in this book, we have 2 like central main characters, 2 women. They actually turn out to be birthday twins, so same birthday, same age. And one of our characters slowly becomes obsessed with the other. And it's just like this weird internal thing where we have to figure out, like, is she crazy, or is she like is she normal? Is she like, what is her vibe? What is she trying to do? What's her goal? And so one of our main characters kind of, stalks the other one. And then she goes and it's like, hey, I know you do this podcast series, because this other girl is like a influencer. And so she's like, hey, I know you do this podcast, and I thought maybe it'd be a cool idea if you had me on your podcast, and we can talk about us being birthday twins. And that was kind of her in for the book. And so it just kind of slowly takes this really dark, creepy turn. I do have a reading vlog for that book. Definitely check it out. And in that vlog and in this video, I will say that about halfway point, I turned to audiobook, and I regret not fully doing audiobook, because the audiobook is so spectacular. They have amazing sound, like just different sound control and sound systems. They have like over 10 plus like actors like doing the audiobook. It's so well done. The podcast it feels like you're listening to a podcast. It's amazing. So if you're interested in reading a thriller book, I highly recommend this one, because in my opinion, it was done well. But like I said, thrillers aren't my thing. So even if it's done well, it still won't ever get a 5-star, which is kind of my way of letting you know that just because I gave it a 3 stars, I still think most people who enjoy thrillers would enjoy this. Next book I read was a Brandy Sandy. So this is actually the very first book that I have completed that's by Brandon Sanderson. I at one point did attempt to read the first book in what is that book he has out? I don't know. He's got a book series. I don't know what it's called, but anyways, I wanted to like try to get into his world. And obviously, if you know of Brandon Sanderson, he's a very popular, famous sci-fi writer, sci-fi fantasy. And all of his books, as I'm told, as I understand, all of his books fall under the Cosmere, which is what he calls his like world. It's like an overarching kind of universe. So every book that he makes either falls, it just falls in like the same world. And I love and enjoy myself a good sci-fi, fantasy book series. I love that kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, let me try it out. So I read The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. I gave it 3 stars. Like, oh my gosh, can I tell you that like that whole reading period was so just like ugh for me. Like it was so ugh because everything was 3 stars. And no, I wasn't in a reading slump, but I felt so blah with like every book I read. That's fine. It's whatever. And so it was called The Emperor's Soul. And we're following this main character. She's a thief, and she's actually a forger, which in this world, she has like the powers to like copy items and rewrite its history to like change how they look and how they act. It was honestly very interesting. And I mean, the amount of creativity you have to even come up with that is pretty amazing. So I'm gonna give him props for just that idea in of itself. So she was captured in the kingdom, and she was given an ultimatum like, hey, either hang or help the kingdom forge the king, was kind of the vibe of it. So I call him Emperor. So the Emperor was like, dare I say, brain dead, and her job was to make a forgery of the Emperor. So the magic, you know, the magic system is very hard to like explain, but like that was her job, was to like fix him. And that was interesting. It was not bad. I just gave it 3 stars. It's a novella, so it was only under 200 pages. It was a fast read. I was hoping that I was gonna love it, because that would then propel me to continue down with all of his other books. Mistborn, that's what the other series is called. I tried reading Mistborn 2 years ago. I think I got maybe 100 pages into it and DNF'd it because I just felt like it was moving so slow, and I felt like I was getting just a mind dump of like the world without any plot, and it was just like a lot for me. So I'll come back to it eventually, but just not right now. Next book I read was called Day of Wrath by William R. Forstein. I don't know how to say that. Also 3 stars. Like I said, guys, like I don't know what to tell you. A lot of 3 stars. This was also super short, under 200 pages. I feel like this author is kind of underground as well. I want to say he also made a kind of popular book. I don't even know, but anyways, this book was about our main character, he was a teacher, and he goes to school one day, and all of a sudden a school shooting starts. But it's not like, it's like a terrorist kind of school shooting where like foreign operatives are coming into the country and trying to like fuck up the whole school system. And so throughout different states, there's like numerous of school shootings happening at the same time. It was just crazy. It was a lot. Gave it 3 stars. It was interesting. There were some good lines in there, some like heart pounding scenes, but not enough to really, you know, make me love it or make me hate it. Next book, Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. Now this was a recent book that I was honestly very excited and very happy to be reading. Oh, that book was a breath of fresh air from the last like 5 I had been reading, because it was the first one where the very first page had me. It was a prologue. It was like a 1-page prologue. And that very first page, I was in it. I was like, how did she write that? How did she write that? I'll put the very first page on the screen so you guys can read it, because it's so palpable and so raw and so real that as soon as I read that, I was like, I'm gonna like this book. So This is this author has one other book. I think it's called Frankenstein, Cleopatra, Frankenstein, something weird like that. But this is a really good book. I gave it 4 stars. It's also literary fiction, and it's called Blue Sisters because we are following the Blue Sisters. Their last name is Blue, and so we are following 3 sisters, but there actually was 4, but one of them died, and that's kind of the propelling of the plot of them trying to reconnect a year after one of their sisters died. I will say that I felt like a weirdly strong connection to one of the characters, which is honestly kind of sad because that was the character that died. So I didn't really get a lot of, you know, time with her. But that character was, they described her like so interestingly that it just felt like I shared similar personality traits and like attributes with that character. And she ended up having a chronic illness that I also have. Like, it was so weird. I was like, what is this book? And so that character, her name was Nikki, and I just felt so like connected to her, and then she died, and I was like, damn, okay. But it was such a good book. It was a great start. It was amazing. Like, everything felt so vivid and real and so so like introspective, and I loved it. So I gave it 4 stars. It was a great book. The next book I read was Pines, Wayward Pines by Blake Crouch. So this book is the first in a series. It's also a TV show. I decided to read this because, like I said, I don't read a lot of thrillers, and I know this was popular, and I know at one point I was interested in watching the TV show. So I was like, why not read the book and see what's what? And so this is just passes the threshold of 300 pages. I also gave this book 3 stars. This is like a super weird book. Like, what happens is we have our main character who is in the FBI, and he gets tasked with going to a small town called Wayward Pines. And he has to go there because 2 other FBI agents went missing in that town. And so his job is to find out what happened, to find them. And so he goes there, but as soon as he gets there, he can't leave. So on numerous different scenes, he's trying to get in a car and drive away. But as soon as he passes like the threshold of the town limit and he keeps driving, it's like a loop, and he loops back into the town. And so he is like unable to like leave the town. Everyone who's in the town is creepy and weird and says weird things and is not to be trusted. Like, it's so just like creepy and, you know, sci-fi. It's like a thriller book, a sci-fi book, a mystery book, a horror book, all in one. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely pick it up. It was very, very weird. It took some very interesting creative liberties. At the very end, we do find out what happened. So even though it is a book series, we are kind of given an explanation for everything by the end of the book, thankfully. Very weird. It was very, like, it was big. It was a lot. It wasn't for me. It was a lot. But I have to praise the creativity again, because it's just so random that I don't know how you think of these things. So I have one more book to talk about, and that is the very first book in Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I read this book, I want to say like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And I also have a reading vlog for that book. I gave it 4 stars. That was very, very nice. I'm actually very excited to continue the series. I will be picking up the next book probably in a week, maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, it worked for me, which is weird because I was worried it wouldn't. I had also previously read the very first book in ACOTAR, another reading vlog to check out, and that one didn't hit for me. But like, objectively, I felt as though her writing was stronger than I thought it was going to be. Like, her writing was good enough for me to be interested, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I thought, okay, ACOTAR didn't work for me. I'm not a fan of like this Beauty and the Beast weird purring, growling shit. That was fucking weird to me. Didn't like any of it. I was not a fan of that, but maybe with a different plot, I could be into it. And so I was like, I know Game of Thrones, whoa. I know Throne of Glass is popular as well. So I said, why not? And it was good, guys. And for it being like 400 pages, like I read that book in, 4 days, which is fast for me. So, yeah, I enjoyed myself. We have a main character female, and she's like 18 years old. She's like the best assassin in the town / country, whatever you want to call it. And she's like captured, and the prince is like, hey, we want you to go into a competition and then be our assassin that's going to work for the kingdom. It was weird. It was interesting. I liked it. So I will be continuing the series. But those are all the books that I have recently read. I am currently reading this book, Come Fly With Me. I do not know the author. This is actually my first book that I've read by her. I think her first name is Camille. But this is currently an ARC, so you can't buy it. I actually did get that from NetGalley, which is pretty cool because it was my first time ever using NetGalley. So definitely stay tuned for a reading vlog with that book. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought of them. And let me know if you have any video ideas for me. All right, guys. Bye.